Good day to you all, comrades and friends. This is Global Weekly News, serial number 44. First, let us see the civil war in Sudan. Since 15th April, internal conflict between Sudanese Armed Forces (SAF) and paramilitary Rapid Support Forces (RSF) is going on. As per WHO statement, World Health Organization statement, more than 427 were killed, 3,700 were injured. Though now and then peace accord is reached, it is always violated. On 24th April, Sudanese Doctors Association issued a report on the attacks on Khartoum, the capital. Civilians are being killed. Hospitals also are under attack. Ceasefire agreement was in force during Ramzan for only 3 days. Internet connectivity is lost. More than 70% hospitals have become inoperable. Due to power outages, and shortage of water, the foreigners in Sudan are flying away from Sudan, including Indians. People are migrating to neighboring countries also. Both Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces, the paramilitary, are keen in saving foreigners' lives. They do not show any concern towards peace-loving Sudanese people. US and European Union emphasize political solution through negotiations. Communist Party of Sudan, left revolutionary forces say that there shall not be any compromise with the military, neither any negotiations with the military. They want total civilian rule without any part for the military. Egypt and Saudi Arabia are supporting SAF and RSF respectively. Resistance committees are struggling against the military. These committees, in coordination with Sudan Doctors Association, are involved in relief activities. They say that they cannot trust SAF and RSF, Sudanese Armed Forces and Rapid Support Forces. They insist upon inquiries into the war crimes and justice should be delivered to the victims. Comrades and friends, in the context of Ukraine war, recently Russia's foreign minister has visited some of the Latin American countries. Let us see that. Lavrov's Latin American visit. Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, recently visited Latin American countries Nicaragua, Venezuela, Brazil and Cuba. On all these countries, US sanctions are there. These Latin American countries do not accept US stand in the Ukraine war. Lula da Silva, president of Brazil, recently visited China. He met Chinese President Xi Jinping and signed 15 agreements. Lula said that US provoked Ukraine war. Solution through negotiations shall be arrived at. John Kirby, US official, immediately responded to this. He said that Lula is parroting what Russia and China have been saying so long. Lavrov's Latin American visit has helped to develop and strengthen relations with these countries. Cuba, Venezuela, Brazil and Nicaragua are facing US sanctions in international trade and financial transactions. But these countries carry on trade freely with Russia. Lavrov ended his visit in Cuba. He condemned US sanctions on Cuba. He appreciated that Latin American countries are marching on the path of multipolar world. Comrades and friends, we are going to see what is happening in Rwanda, the African country. Rwanda is a Central African country. Its president is Paul Kagame. He went to Benin, another African country, Benin, and met its president. He promised the help of Rwandan troops in facing insurgents in the north of Benin. Pressmen asked a question at Kagame regarding the impact of Cold War being conducted against Russia and China by the United States on the African continent. Kagame replied that these powers have their own issues. They are sucking small African countries. Why should the US try to increase its influence on Africa while it is questioning Russia and China, which are extending help to African countries? In the Sahel region of Africa, in Mali, Guinea, and Burkina Faso, military coups took place. Lower middle class officers are there in the military. There is a growing sentiment against the presence of French troops in this region. Therefore, the French troops are evacuated from the Sahel region. French Totals is a French natural gas company in Mozambique. Kagame is intervening to protect this French concern. Paul Kagame represents the national interests of Rwanda. Comrades, now let us go to Cuba. Recently, a president has been elected. Let us see that. On 26th March, 10th parliamentary elections took place in Cuba. 470 MPs were elected. They do not depend on money power. They did not get elected because they belong to a particular political party. Candidates were selected after a long process of wider consultations with various people's organizations at various levels. The 470 parliament members elected Miguel Diaz-Canel as the president of Cuba for a second term. Salvador Mesa was elected as vice president. 97.66% MPs voted in favor of Diaz-Canel. The MPs appreciated the role of the president during corona pandemic facing US sanctions. They also lauded the foreign policy of Cuba. Diaz-Canel thanked the secretary of Cuba Communist Party, Raul Castro, and the people of Cuba for electing him as the president for a second term. Diaz-Canel, in his inaugural speech, said, "We should focus on food production. Our investments shall be effectively utilized. We must pay attention in socialist social development and successfully face inflation." Cuba is facing several economic sanctions. Large-scale shortage of fuel also is there, since there is no gasoline for cars, and hence transportation of goods that has become a problem. When Donald Trump was the president of the United States, sanctions on Cuba were intensified. Trump included Cuba in the list of countries sponsoring terrorism. Cuba intervened in Colombia to bring about peace, and this is looked upon as terrorism by Trump. Joe Biden also did not relax the sanctions on Cuba. There is a severe dip in Cuba's gross domestic product. Cuba faced many natural disasters like hurricane, etc. In the fire accident at Matanzas oil storage facility on 5th August 2022, one person died, 17 firemen were found missing. Family Code. The new family law was recently passed in Cuba. This is the best family code in the world. This code gives additional protection to elderly, children, and displaced persons. There are more women and more youth in Cuban parliament. Cuba is in the forefront in providing health facilities. Cuba has sent medical teams, including doctors, to many needy foreign countries, many a times. Comrades and friends, there is a shortage of health workers all over the world, especially the African continent. Let us look into it. People's Dispatch, international media, is having connections with the People's Health Movement. People's Health Dispatch is giving news on health. World over, especially in Africa, there is a shortage of health workers. In global north, that is rich countries, less wages are paid to health workers. They engage health workers from the global south also, the backward poor countries, as contract labor and pay even lesser wages. Nigerian government is thinking about banning its doctor graduates from migrating abroad for jobs. Zimbabwe, another African government, is considering to treat the graduate doctors migrating as criminal offense. The health minister told this. World Health Organization in a statement released said that in 55 countries there is a severe shortage of health workers. Out of this list of 55 countries, 40 are in Africa, including Zimbabwe and Nigeria. In many countries, due to the policies dictated by IMF, World Bank, and other international financial institutions, the governments are not able to spend adequate amounts of money towards health care. Health workers of these countries, they think that they do not have a future in their own countries. Bright future they do not have. For instance, the average monthly wage of a Zimbabwe worker is $400. Even if this is doubled, it will not be adequate for a decent living because Zimbabwe's inflation has gone up by 229%. Health workers from the global south, they want to migrate to global north. In global north, that is rich countries, the health workers are protesting for a wage increase due to hike in inflation, etc. In United Kingdom alone, there are 11,000 Nigerian doctors, the third largest migrant doctors. There is a migration of health workers from former Soviet Union republics to core European countries like Germany, France, Italy, etc. Global South countries do not increase the taxes on the rich. They do not increase the wages. Due to this, there is a brain drain. That is, the intellectuals and health workers, after education, do not want to serve their motherlands. They want to migrate to foreign countries, and this is called a brain drain. That is happening. The highest inflation in the world is in Zimbabwe. It is 229%. Many countries are struggling with the inflation rise of 8%, 10%, and 15%, so on. In Turkey, inflation has gone up 57%. The farmers of Zimbabwe are exploited for decades. Lastly, we are going to see the shift in the foreign policy of Japan. In the middle of April, Japan's foreign ministry released Diplomatic Blue Book 2023. Diplomatic Blue Book. This is an important guidebook on international issues. Japan's foreign minister, in the foreword to the Blue Book, has stated that historically now the world is in a turning point. Hours after Russian forces entered Ukraine, that is 24th February 2022, the Japanese government signed the G7 statement that condemned the large-scale military aggression and called for severe and coordinated economic and financial sanctions on Russia. The next day, Japan's foreign minister announced that Japan would sanction designated individuals related to Russia, freeze assets of 3 Russian banks, and sanction exports to Russia's military. In its Diplomatic Blue Book 2022, Japan condemned Russia and urged the Russian government to withdraw its troops from Ukraine immediately and comply with international law. Despite all the talk of sanctions, Japan continues to import energy from Russia. In 2021, 8.8% of Japan's imported liquefied natural gas came from Russia. In 2022, the imports from Russia increased to 9.5%. Most of this energy came from Russia's Sakhalin Island, where Japanese companies and the government have made substantial investments. Sakhalin 2 is an important project for energy security, including the stable supply of electricity and gas in Japan. Since July 2022, Japan's officials have continued to emphasize Japan's national interests over its obligations to the Group 7 countries and to its own statements about the war. In August 2022, the Japanese government asked 2 private companies, Mitsui and Mitsubishi, to deepen its involvement in Russia's Sakhalin 2 project. The Diplomatic Blue Book 2023 makes 3 important points. First, The post-Cold War era has ended. That China is post-Cold War era has ended and United States has become weakened. Second, China is Japan's greatest strategic challenge. And the third, global South countries must be taken seriously by Japan. Global South countries do not act as per the will of the Western countries. Japan will promote multilateralism. Japan has refused to send arms to Ukraine. So this is all the Global Weekly News serial number 44. See you comrades next week. Thank you. Lal Salam.